Boots and Baddies. I've got my friend Jay here today, and we're going to talk about PTSD, which is post traumatic stress disorder. And we're especially focusing on first responders and the lack of the presence of the conversation PTSD in the departments.
Yeah, I would definitely say lack of total misunderstanding.
Of what it even is.
You can't talk about it.
No.
Like,
What? So okay, what is? If I've never heard the term PTSD, it's an abbreviation for post traumatic stress disorder. So what would that look like?
so I can speak from my experience what that looks like as because I didn't know. I did. Nobody told me this is what PTSD looks like.
I remember sitting in briefs when I was in the Marine Corps, like after a deployment, and we'd have to watch PowerPoint slides on, oh, these are signs of PTSD, but we always laughed about it. Like, oh, you're going to go kick your dog when you get back. It's just the
Well,
stigma is.
for us, it's like post-incident stress debriefing. So, hey, you went to a school shooting yesterday or this morning. It must have been really tragic for you. Tell me how you feel. And there's a room of other responders that are telling you their worst day. You're like, well, heck, I can't deal with my own worst day. I don't want to hear your worst day. But if we talk about it in a circle of peers, then you understand what you feel is normal, and then you just go take a shower, clean off the blood, get back on an ambulance, go on another call. Well, I don't feel like doing that. I need something more. Well, wait a minute. So you're injured. You can't work here. You're a baby.
You're a baby,
I,
yeah.
you need to talk to a psychiatrist. Well, we need to take your badge away, and
Yeah.
we need to put you off work for a little
You're a liability. I've got a family that and friends that like have a certain level of clearance with the government, but if they seek out medical help at a mental health facility and try to admit themselves for a couple of days, they could lose their clearance and then they could lose their help, their income. People don't realize that there's tons of help out there for PTSD, but the backlash that comes with it for anyone with a government clearance, a badge, or anything. So this is the big issue: is where do they go? What do they do?
So it's even the ability to self-report. So to go to a supervisor and go, "Hey, I'm really struggling. Like mentally, I am struggling. I cannot sleep. I cannot eat. I cannot focus." Um, a lot of companies, a lot of agencies want to tell you we have employee resources. Feel free to reach out to employee
Like
resources.
a pamphlet.
Yeah, here's a phone number. Call this doc in a box, and they'll talk you through this crisis.
I found a pamphlet for you.
Yeah, here's your pamphlet. I hope you don't go home and kill yourself tonight. And it's really sometimes that callous, and you witness that day in, day out, and you go, man, well, when I self-report, well, John's not been at work in a month. What's going on? Or it's the station talk of the station house or the firehouse or the report room. And it's like, oh my God, did you hear about that? He just can't handle it anymore.
Yeah, and there was a guy that I was in Iraq with, like when he had a flip out, and it's like that's what he's always going to be remembered for is because he cried under a desk during an attack. And it's like, no, that was a post-traumatic stress, that was a response after years and years and many deployments. And like that's the stigma that gets attached for any type of PTSD breakdown, and they all look different. Like sometimes you might have a PTSD response of avoidance where you just work and work and work and work. You might have a PTSD response of suicidal thoughts or homicidal thought. It's different for everyone, and so does that trauma that leads a person to become, I guess, a victim of PTSD.
Yeah, so it's kind of like story in reverse for me, right? At this point, it's like, okay, so there's an official medical diagnosis. Someone has evaluated you through multiple events or contacts and said, okay, you truly have complex PTSD. New science, new medical journal reports are calling it PTSI, so recognizing like a biological injury in the brain that we can retrain and reteach and try to help, right? We'll get to that. But so I'm at like end of career, hey, this is a real event. This occurred. Like these were events that happened to you or you're a witness of.
So you're in a unique spot because you're not a rookie. You said end of career, so that gives you an opportunity where you feel that you can talk about this.
Right. So what's my fear? So the podcast gets out, a captain, a lieutenant, a potential employer sees it and goes, hey, Jay's very damaged. He has PTSD. He's medicated. He's seeking help. Hey, he can't handle the job. Let's just not hire that guy. Okay, that's fine. I'm safe.
And on the flip side, I hear that, and I think a captain or a lieutenant hears this, and they say, "I want him to come in and talk to my guys about PTSD."
And so just being around EMS for so long, like I was blessed. Started in 2001. Did my first ride-alongs here in Anderson County with the Anderson County Ambulance Service. Went through school, was given some great, unique opportunities at Rural Metro Ambulance, where I promoted pretty quickly, and then finished my career as a paramedic, doing non-emergent care for elderly, dialysis patients, those things. And you would think, like, well, when did it boil over? Like, what was the breaking point? Like, what was it? Was it a child that died? Was it a shooting? Was it that you saw in the news? There was this awful theater shooting in Colorado, and these kids had to respond to it, like young, teenage paramedics and EMTs, that you know it's going to affect them. And you know the system's going to fail them. You know those kids and those young men and women in the profession are going to go back to their station. They're going to take off their blood-soaked clothing. They're going to take a shower. They're going to go on their next call, and they're not going to be allowed to talk about it.
No.
They're just not. It's not tolerated. And then we expect them to then get off shift and go home and be a mom and dad.
Yeah. And have emotions, and not like a disassociation is something that I think a lot of folks that have had PTSD, sometimes you go home and you just don't want to associate with anyone because it's the only time you get to rest. There's just so many different ways that we try to like self-medicate and handle PTSD, but it's a really, for me, it was really isolating. I used to battle PTSD and military sexual trauma, but I did it silently and kind of internally. So, like, lots of suicidal thoughts. I was never one that I wanted to hurt other people. I just wanted to hurt myself. So everyone's PTSD definitely, like, I feel like looks a little different.
Yeah, and I think for me, so I have a 5-year-old daughter, have twin boy girls at home. And I think for me, the moment I realized something was, I could no longer just keep it in a box on a shelf, right? I couldn't just put this intersection, don't drive through there. Hey, that noise, okay, it's normal to startle when you hear somebody drop a pallet on a concrete floor. Well, sure, but it's not normal for your heart rate to stay elevated for 8 to 10 hours and not be able to sleep and have to drink alcohol. Not want to, but maybe you do want to, right? It helps numb the feelings and you finally get sleep. So self-medicating. But I think for me, the breaking point was when I looked at my children and everybody's telling me, like, oh, this must be so powerful and so wonderful. Like, you're holding a gift from God and y'all fought so hard for it. And I was like, cool. You might as well have handed me a watermelon hole. Like, I would literally feel nothing. I think at the moment I realized that I have no human touch, feel, emotional response to seeing your own children, you realize something's wrong.
And it wasn't like that before. It was it's I feel like disassociating from humans and other people that we really care about, because there's also like the primary PTSD when you personally go through something, but what people also don't talk about is secondary PTSD. You see that a lot with interrogators overseas. You see that especially with first responders. Maybe that first responder didn't lose their house to a fire, but they watched devastation in someone's eyes and then had to go home or had to pull a dead baby out of a car, and maybe got the baby's blood on you, and the parents just falling apart. And how do you go home like nothing happened without some level of disassociation or a lot of self-medication? I don't think that people give enough credit to the first responders. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, so I get benefits, I get thank yous. I've got a Marine Corps emblem in my car, and I go through the car wash, and people thank me for my service. And it's been over a decade since I got out, and I appreciate that. But I knew when my deployment was going to be over. I knew when my EAS, and yes, I battled really bad with PTSD. But the first responders, it's day in, it's day out. They don't know, when is their deployment over?
So I think that's the hardest part is like, so I was fortunate. My spouse was a flight paramedic, worked on the ambulance for decades, is still a great, I say great, right? I'm kind of biased, but a great nurse. So she had some understanding of what a normal day looks like, but for the general public, they have no idea.
No, they think the firefighters sleep all day and the paramedics like hide out in their ambulance, and that's not the case at all.
Yeah, and it's the so I always ask people at work now. So I'm blessed that often people ask me like, "Are you okay?" Like, tell me what was it? Like, what is it? And I'm like, okay, let me give it to you in the simplest terms. How many times in your life have you called 911?
Once, maybe twice.
So that's a typical answer. Well, my mom was real sick, so we had to call sometimes. Okay. So some EMT, paramedic, firefighter, police officer at times responded to that call. So what made it your worst day ever that you had to pick up a phone and drop everything you're doing and dial 911? Well, I saw this horrific car crash. Okay, well, people will remember that. It made the news, right? But we're putting 19, 20, 21-year-old young men and women in the profession, which God knows we need them. We don't teach them or recognize even the exposure and the cumulative trauma they're going to be exposed
Cumulative
to.
trauma. That's a really good point.
And they go to your worst day that you call 911 twice in a lifetime. They go 8 to 20 times a day.
That that's not what our human brains were not made or conditioned for that.
No one was conditioned for it. So, not or going through an entire career, which I did, 17, 18 years, going, hey, I'm not that guy. I don't need your help. I don't need your debrief meeting. I'm not a baby.
I used to think PTSD was made up. I remember Marines going to me and saying, Corporal, like I'm having, that PowerPoint we watched, like I'm having those symptoms. I'm, memory problems, out lashes. And I was like, no, 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 that's just like made up. And then
I make fun of people.
yeah.
Like, gosh, how terrible am I? Like, we were those people sitting in the break. I'm like, God, what's wrong with him? Why is he crying? Like, harden up, baby. You're going to deal with death and dying every day. This is the world we're in. Treat a human like a robot. You put this piece in. Did it work? No. Well, you put that piece in. Did it work? No. Okay, cool. Just go get another robot. Well, I heard their spouse crying because we just told them their life partner died. Or I was there when the parents pulled up and they found their child dead in a car crash. Like, you don't understand how that screech stays with you. And I'm like, cool, then block it out. Like, don't let it stay with you. Just block it out and go on to the next call. And then you realize they can't.
Yeah.
And it is real. And it hurts. It takes hitting a break yourself to realize that this problem is so much bigger than one police officer, one fireman, one first responder, one nurse, one medic. It's global. It is huge in our industry, and it's just not talked about.
I remember I had my first like PTSD episode. Again, I wasn't wanting to hurt people. I just wanted to hurt myself, and I was like super emotional. Everything got real foggy, and this was I think about 6 months after I got out of the Marine Corps. And of course, a lot of dead end roads at the VA, and I'd heard that I had been diagnosed with severe PTSD, but still was in denial for almost 5 or 6 years after that. I had a suicide attempt, but still wasn't ready to deal with it. I just stayed super busy. I was forced to deal with it after I got wrapped up in a real bad relationship, and my mental health was taken advantage of really bad. And that, even though it was a really horrible experience, it forced me to deal with my PTSD. Before I would cry if I even said PTSD. I couldn't even say post-traumatic stress without getting really emotional and kind of shooken for the rest of the day. But now I talk about it everywhere I go, anyone that will listen, because it needs to be a conversation that we can fluently have in departments, at our dinner table. Like, I would love for people to be like, how's your PTSD today? Like,
Right. And that was, so for me, my breaking point was looking at my kids and not feeling any connection. It's bad enough that you and your spouse have those walls, but you work in the same industry, so you get it. But your child deserves your best, right? And I can't provide that when I don't even feel a connection. It's like, oh yeah, you're cool. Okay, take the battery out, put you to bed, see you tomorrow. And with no fear of what happens if I don't see him tomorrow. Well, it's cool. Like, I don't get it. But I was driving to work in Rockwood. And I'd been talking to some friends who were like, hey, you really need to do something. Like, there's this cool group in Knoxville. It's called Reboot First Responder. It's a peer taught. It's not counseling.
Faith Promise?
Faith Promise. Yeah. So it's totally anonymous. Like, you can go and meet with them, and if anyone leaks that out, they're just out. They're like, it's safe. Your employer won't know. Your spouse don't have to know. You can bring your spouse, but your spouse don't have to know. Totally anonymous. I'm like, cool. Took one time. And I was driving to work the next day, and I was just driving, and I was like, God, I'm broke. Like, yeah. I need help.
So that's like the first step to healing, is acknowledging that we're broke.
And I couldn't say the words. So I called our employee hotline, not associated with any emergency medical field. Worked from the biggest retailers in the world, and I just happened to have a card that I'd given to another associate the day before, and I was like, you know what, I want to call this. Like, I'm going to have to call this. So I called, and the lady said, "So what's going on?" And I could barely get out, "I don't know, but I need help." And I just started bawling, and I just pulled my truck over and sat there. Um, and that was the moment that I said, "How did we get here?
Yeah.
Like how?" Like it's, I mean, you can tell it's weighing on me now. Like, how did we get here? Um, how did it go this far? And then it's like one little box on the shelf starts to crack open, and then it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So my hope is that maybe we normalize to a point we go, I can't tell what your employer may or may not do, but surely to God, there's a mechanism to self-report how you're feeling. Find a quality provider with a quality, good treatment option. That not all treatment options are the same. They can't be. We're not all the same. But we got to talk about it candidly and honestly and tell people the way you're feeling is not unique to you, but the way we will help you heal is going to be unique to you.
Right.
For me, it's darkness. Like everybody goes, "Why do you stay up so late? Like, don't you work early?" I'm gonna drink a glass of wine, read some poetry, sit on the couch in the darkness by myself. That seems like the worst thing to do. Well, yeah, but I don't want to be around anyone.
Yeah.
Well, just go to sleep. Well, gosh, once you close your eyes and night terrors come and dreams that are so vivid that if I was an artist, I always tell people, like, if I could paint every wrinkle on a face. I could paint every cut or scratch on a victim's face. If I could just rekindle and smell and just put you in a room with the smell of what we have experienced in a career.
Smells can definitely be a trigger.
Like, people have no idea the absolute hell and terror first responders go through on a daily basis. And they always want that one big event. It's like it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be one big event. It could be, an onion layer of minor trauma. Everyone's different too. There's things that I've gone through that would just rock somebody's world, but then there's things that didn't phase someone else but phased me. Like there's things I don't even remember. I mean, someone else remembers, but maybe I don't remember because it was too traumatic, or maybe I don't remember because it just wasn't traumatic enough to stand on the chronological events.
And that's it too. It's like, so what finally got me to talk? So we talked about this for months, right? Like, do you want to do this? What does it look like?
Yeah, I reached out to him months ago because God just kept putting him on my heart about sharing his story with PTSD, because he is in a unique spot where he's not actively still in uniform, but went through it quite a bit to.
Yeah, and I think that it's, so for me it was like, what were the goals, right? What's a goal? Like, what comes out of talking about PTSD, putting it on YouTube, putting it on the internet,
Freedom.
your friends see it. So freedom for me, I can finally sleep because I don't have to hide it anymore. But God, if I save one person, like I've lost so many former coworkers to suicide, and there'll always be another one. And nobody wants to talk about that. They, get on Facebook and go, "God, paramedic whoever was such a great person, and we just didn't see this coming, and it's so hard."
And they might not even say the word suicide. They'll just be like, "Oh, he's gone too quick." And
gone too soon. Like, what a great preceptor or proctor or teacher. And like, it's so tragic. We bury another one. And it's like, let's get real. Let's ask, where did we fail that person?
Suicide, I feel like if we talked about it more, I kept my suicide attempts secret for years. I was actually used to keep me quiet at times. Like, well, if you say something, I'm going to tell everyone about your suicide attempt. And that's another reason why I think who we choose as a partner, if you are struggling with PTSD, it's really important that either you stay single or you have a really supportive partner, because you can often be in a really vulnerable position when you're battling mental health.
I think too that, so part of this, like, how did that person seek help before we ended up at another graveside? The fear for me was the moment I reach this door and I say, "Hey, it's not just death and dying, but my gosh, just the cumulative horrendous, the homelessness, the poverty, the abused people, young and old, the fatalities, the smells, trying to pull people out of buildings that are on fire and you just don't get there in time, whatever that is, because everyone's different. You can report it now and you don't just go to Peninsula to get your shoestrings taken, your clothes taken from you, your dignity
It's a
taken.
really good point. Before it gets to that, I can't do this another minute. And yeah, the VA, what they do is they put you in a jumpsuit, and some of that you leave feeling more shame. But maybe things have gotten better over the years. It's been a while since I've been anywhere, but yeah, before it gets to where they're taking your shoe ties and they're putting you in a jumpsuit, going out and reaching out.
And that's it. So for me, it was a simple Google search. Like I feel like there's something going on. And it led me to, hey, this is recognized. It's a big deal.
That worked out better than mine. Mine, I woke up in the county jail facing 60 years in prison. That's when I go, oh, I should probably do something about this.
So yeah, mine worked out a little
A
better,
little better.
a little better for sure. But it was also just talking to friends in my peer group, and they went, "Man, you're not alone.
Yeah.
I've been battling this for 10 years, but I couldn't tell anybody. Um, hey, I've got a great group at church. Like it's affiliated because it has to be, but like we're not gonna like browbeat you, but just show up. In fact, I'll come get you and take you. And
Yeah, a lot of the support groups for like veterans of PTSD and reboot, they're not coming through beating you over with the Bible. It's
no,
not. It's not like that.
and just like a podcast, like, I resisted it. Like I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't an easy walk to go sit in a room and admit I'm broken. Like, there's something physiologically, biologically wrong.
I believe in my opinion, it's a spiritual attack. So anytime like this podcast, I've been under spiritual warfare all week. The devil trying to get me to like, who's going to listen to you, and you're a felon, what are you doing up down there, and you need to be quiet. So whatever your belief is, there is going to be a darkness that's going to tell you don't go get help, and it's usually going to be fueled by fear and shame, which is of darkness of the devil. So getting help, God wants us to feel better. Your loved ones want you to feel better. Deep down inside, no matter what you're going through, you want to feel better, and you can get that freedom. I have never felt such joy and such freedom since I totally like came clean. I openly talk about suicide attempts where before I didn't want anybody to know about them.
And for me, it was, so I kept putting it off. Right, I'd miss a cycle. I'm not going to go to that class. I'm not going to do. And if people don't believe, like, folks actually listen and care and want to help you,
Mhm.
they want to help you find a pathway to healing.
It helps them heal.
Yes, we'd just gotten our twins home from the NICU. We had a nanny. I was like, you know what? I'm going to drink some beer, hang out in the pool. I may go weed eat some fence rows. Like, I've got a lot of things to do other than go to Reboot tonight. Like, this is the first class. I'm not walking through that door. I'm not going in front of my peers and telling them, like, hey, I'm broken. And a car pulls in, and my wife goes, "Who's that?" And I was like, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
So my longest partner on the ambulance, um, a partner, can't tell you a name, right? Because they're driving me to this class. Don't matter whether they attend or not, but I was going. And the first responder instructor I had in the year 2000 was in the front seat. And she came and got me in the garage and said, "I love you, and you're going." And said, "You don't have to go inside, but you're going. Like, let's just get to the parking lot."
It's awesome.
And that was the hardest 150-yard walk from the parking lot to that classroom.
Because you needed it the most.
Like, oh my God. Just to walk into that room and go, hey, I'm here. Like, I made it. I didn't have to talk to nobody. I didn't have to speak to anybody. I knew they couldn't tell anybody I was in that room with them. But the shame I felt, the fear, the anxiety, the emotion, I understand why people have fear of reporting. Hey, I need help. Because you don't know what's going to happen from that point forward. But my goal is we change it and we tell people the support system is growing. Look, it's still underfunded. At the federal level, treatment for PTSD and PTSI,
How much is it?
it is less than like a 1/10 of 1% of,
Yeah.
like, this tiniest fraction of the federal budget goes to first responders, much less war veterans. But first responders, the money just don't exist because the problem's not known. We just don't talk about it. We just bury
We
people.
have marches. I co-found a march for veteran suicide up north, and we need more of them. But again, the veterans, and I'm so thankful for the support that we have. On the flip side, I feel like we are heavily neglecting our first responders. Why are we not talking about these things more often?
It's simply go to a funeral and do a Facebook memorial, put a ribbon on a badge, and then you move forward. You go, gosh, what? It must have been
Try not to
cancer.
think about them,
Yeah,
or
just don't talk about it. Because I'm not weak. I'm not susceptible to suicide. And for me, fortunately, it hasn't been suicide. It's been, hey, I'll just abuse this or that so that I can find sleep, so that I can numb the feeling. Oh, well, that's an excuse. Hey, I'll ride that excuse. It felt good. It was safe. It was comfortable. Instead of going, hey, there's an issue and I need to resolve that root cause so that I can be a dad, so that I can be a good spouse, so that, hey, maybe I can still, because I'm a licensed medic still, I can go respond and not have to worry about, can you be put in a high stress environment and perform? Absolutely, because I sought treatment. So don't put me in an office and take away my badge, my gun, my ability to go take care of the community, because I did seek treatment. Don't look at that as a negative. Look at that as somebody that sought healing and I'm on a pathway and I'm still able to perform my job as prescribed by the state and the national registry.
so department heads need to recognize that somebody who sought help and has been healed, or is, it's a continuous healing
Continuous
process.
process.
They shouldn't receive career backlash at all. I mean,
If
if
any,
you've been cleared and you're of sound mind.
and there's a fine line. I get it. An officer that's just been involved in a shooting, an officer that's going through a divorce, that's addicted to alcohol or some other stimulant or whatever it may be. Hey, we may need a timeout and pump the brakes, but it doesn't mean we have to destroy that person.
Forever, they're
A
not discarded.
paramedic who's crying on the ambulance in the front seat, leaving a tragic event, doesn't have to be a newsworthy event, but whatever that was, they don't have to take months off and sit in a room and be medicated to the point of being a mummy. We have to recognize the injury is real. There are treatment pathways available, and that person still has dignity and a career ahead of them.
Dignity, that's a big thing.
And we need to recognize it and allow them to continue to perform and take care of other humans. But until we bust that stigma and until we start funding PTSD research and treatment for the first responder community, we're going to continue to bury our friends.
So education department has less backlash on your career for seeking help and more funding for the PTSD programs.
What a huge step,
Yeah.
right? What if that's one less colleague that we go to their funeral, or we just lose them from the service?
Well,
Like
and that's
people,
another shortage. The shortages are, for police departments, fire departments, staff shorting is horrible right now.
career burnout is through the roof, and why? Like, what's the reward at the end of the day? I work 4 extra shifts. I don't see my family. I don't have physical or mental fitness. I just go in every day, wash, rinse, repeat, pray to make it to another paycheck. Wash, rinse, repeat, pray to make it to another day. Wash, rinse, repeat. And eventually, it's not sustainable.
Right.
We know the model that we use is broken. We know that the mental health care available to the first responder community is minimalist at best.
I mean, we talked about chaplains. I've met some really phenomenal chaplains. I've got a chaplain friend in Blount County. He's very relatable. But then I've heard of chaplains. A friend of mine that's in Knox County talks about how unapproachable the chaplain is.
So we had that. So we, one of my partners and I.
So a chaplain is usually kind of like a spiritual guidance. You're there on, in the military, sometimes hospitals, and police departments, fire departments, EMS, to also kind of be there for their mental health and guide them to resources.
Right. So we looked at it as, hey, this is our chaplain. He comes to an in-service once a year. We
No
pay him
real
a little
relationship.
money. There's no real great relationship. But when you're in a crisis, he'll come sit with you on the couch and talk to you, or come by the station and check in on you. And they try to be involved, right? But they typically, they're not making a living being a chaplain for an ambulance service. Let's just be honest. So they have a church, they have interfaith clinic, they're doing other things. So my experience, like the first time, was like, hey, yeah, we'll sit down and talk. My partner and I had a infant fatality in November. We had an infant fatality on Thanksgiving Day, and then Christmas morning we found a 9-year-old unresponsive who, despite everyone's efforts, he died. And we realized that now, like 3 infants or pediatric patients within 30 days, so 14 shifts. Hey, like, I can't. Like, I can't face another day. So our chaplain came by the station to talk to us and was like, hey, let's debrief a little. And I'll never forget, amazing guy, still works in the industry, still a chaplain. But he did what most chaplains do. Um, Puts his hand on your knee or shoulder and said, hey, I understand you're hurting, but everything happens because God's will. God has a plan. And I stopped there. And I was like, okay, I'm done with this avenue of like healing. If God's plan is that any parent finds their child dead in a crib, I don't like that guy, right? If God's will is that a brother and sister are playing PlayStation and the sister runs in the living room and goes, Mom, something's wrong with Buddy. Something's wrong with brother. Something's wrong with my buddy. And a mom walks in and finds their child purple on the floor and calls dad at work and says, get home quick. And you hear them screaming down the hallways, you're telling them their child's dead. If that's God's plan, I don't want to be a part of it, right? So I was done with the chaplain at this point, not realizing that, what do they say? What can you possibly say to make that better? You can't. And that goes back to part of treating PTSD is realizing there is nothing I can do to take away experiences you experience.
It's very complex, but again, resources. I feel like follow up. I've had before I was a believer. There was a reverend up in Indiana that would just constantly check in on me, even though no matter what he said, what Bible verse he gave me, nothing was going to heal it. But that follow through, that just being there, sometimes just being an ear, even if you don't have the right answers, and that goes for if if you're a spouse or a support network to someone you might not have what they need to hear. Sometimes just hearing them and checking on them. Yeah.
They're in the bathroom crying. Just go sit on the floor. Don't speak. It's okay.
Sometimes, just like in Job, sometimes when you open your mouth, you could make things worse. But being there and being consistent is really important as a support network.
Yeah, and it was, what's your outlet? So for me, it was cycling for a long time.
I saw that. You were like riding everywhere.
Yeah, 5,000 miles a year, pedaling a bicycle, working full time as a paramedic, going through graduate school, being a father, being a spouse.
I think they call it avoidance.
Yeah, I think that's avoidance. So it really hit me when people tied it back to like Lance Armstrong. Like, how were you so great riding a bike? He's like, well, I was running from something. Obviously, I was a fraud. Well, what was I running from? That I was so fit and I had a nutritional plan and I was doing all these things. Well, when do you see your family? Well, I don't. Like, I got to go ride my bike. It's Tuesday night. I got to go be on the road. Well, it's Thursday night. I got to go ride. Well, it's Saturday morning. I got to go ride 70 miles. Well, don't that take time? Well, yeah, but who cares? Like, they'll see me when I get back. And then avoidance, when we hit on that in reboot, and it's like one of the number one is avoidance. Like, just isolate yourself. Find something to be all in.
Well, because you're like, I'm not hurting anybody.
I'm just doing this to myself to be fit. Like, it's good for me. It allows me to be a dad. Well, but what are you running from?
I used to use avoidance, like really stupid relationships, working too much. And my thing is, I'm not hurting anybody. When my PTSD got so bad and I woke up in the Roane County Jail, it does affect people. My grandma crying, my brother who had to bail me out, which was a significant amount. So our PTSD, untreated PTSD, does affect people. And if you think, well, I'm just going to avoid it and it doesn't hurt anybody, eventually it's going to come to a head and it will hurt people. And so that's another incentive. I hope that if you're listening, I hope that it gives you some, motivation to get help, because it's not just hurting you, it is hurting other people.
Yeah. And I think now just that we're like right on the forefront starting to recognize that this is real. It's not make-believe.
Doesn't go away on its own.
It doesn't heal itself.
No, it just gets worse.
There are so many new emerging treatments available that are showing a lot of promise. Ketamine being one.
What is that?
So they're using ketamine to not hypnotize, but to really try to. So there's a lot of ways that I try to not replay an event, but pull it out of the filing cabinet where it's right here in the periphery. You just focus on it, and it's real. It happened, but let's refile that a little lower on the priority list, right? Eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing therapies, cognitive processing therapies.
The EDM, where you follow the finger.
Yeah, let's follow it. Let's do flashlight. Let's do sensation and touch. Like, there's so many emerging treatments out there that show a lot of promise. So again, it's like, one, the acknowledgement that it's real. Two, acknowledging something's wrong with me. Like, something has occurred. Something has happened to me. And then being open to, hey, I'm not just going to be locked away. Awesome. So there's some safety there. I mean, maybe I need it for 3 days to reset. Cool. So give me 3 days, give me an in and out plan, make sure my family's took care of, and let's get me back.
Ridgeview has a program like a 3 day, 3 to 4 day. There's Peninsula. There's a lot of different places that you can go and get a few days to rest.
They're like, I just need respite. Like, I just need to reset. And then coming out of that, there's so many good providers, and I had no clue the network existed. Through my Reboot family, I found there's tons of world-renowned specialists in our East Tennessee area that have retired here, but are still practicing that focus strictly on first responder community. Um, there's several in Knoxville that strictly cater to first responder community. And yeah, they'll see external patients, but they will cancel them in a second to work in a first responder in crisis. I had no clue that was available. And I think how many people have gone before us?
Okay, so right now I know for a fact that I have some friends that are first responders that are watching this. What do they do that are actively first responders? They're working 60 to 100 hours a week. What do they do?
So I think the first thing they do is the best pathway that I know is they can get on Facebook right now and just type Reboot First Responder.
If they're in East Tennessee.
If they're in East Tennessee.
What if they're in Indiana?
So if they're in Indiana, it's difficult. Because now we're back to a Google search. What exists in Indiana? Okay. We don't know. I can tell you there's a national suicide hotline, right? Yeah, we know that's real. And that's a great thing to know. But how do I start treatment for PTSD if I'm in Indiana? I'd love to tell you. I'm walking it with you.
Maybe if you're watching this, if you can put whatever local hotline there is or facilities that you can go to wherever you're at, whatever state you're in.
Right. And maybe we can start linking that. But why isn't there a national database that says, this is your crisis, here's how you reach out in each state?
I think there are, but again, like it's like a pamphlet that's usually at a mental health facility. And if you're already in a mental health facility, you've probably already took the first step. We need to normalize this. All department heads, everybody, even if you're a rookie and this, God's put it on your heart to be involved with, helping with PTSD with your brothers and sisters, maybe you bring the pamphlets in. Maybe you be the one to introduce it at the table.
And I think that's the biggest challenge is we look at it and go, it's end of career. It's I injured my back. So this one day I was a great paramedic and I was out taking care of people when I got injured, and then I was medically retired. Well, there was no parade. There was no celebration in the break room. There was no, hey, you've served your community well. We appreciate you. Let's help you transition to normal life. And let's be honest, the first responder community, whether we want to admit it or not, because there's all these cool cliche shirts like tools of the trade and my job is to save your life, not kiss your whatever, or save your butt but not kiss it, right? All these cute things. But it is a lifestyle. It is your family. You see them 24 hours at a time.
So when you lose that,
you lose part of your identity. Your identity's gone. And nobody wants to realize or admit it, but I've talked to many police officers in our community that said the day that I lost my gun and my badge and the responding responsibilities, I lost who I was. I lost my marriage after that. I almost shot myself. I checked every box except for putting a gun in my mouth. Nobody realizes that into career transition, it's not an easy one.
I'm glad you mentioned that because, that kind of is separate but overlaps with PTSD because I've seen it a lot in the military, even folks that didn't necessarily go through a traumatic experience, but they lost that identity of being a Marine or being a soldier and not really finding their identity in the civ div.
And I think that part of the fear is that, if I admit I lose, I don't want to give up anything, right? You're typically an A-type personality if you're in emergency services. You're used to winning. We don't lose, right? We drill, we train. We're going to rescue you. We're going to save you. We're going to give you a normal life back. That's our job. So to admit we're not normal or I'm injured is hard. Like, I need help this time. I can't help you.
Well, there's that stigma that, the first responders, they're always, type A, clean cut, they're kind of militant. There's nothing wrong with them. They've got, they're educated. They're top-notch mental health, but again, they're out rescuing everyone else, but whoever rescues them.
They just don't. And it's also recognizing, and again, I was numb or dumb to the idea that, one, it's real, is that it doesn't take a 20-year veteran of first responder agencies to have PTSD. It can be the 19-year-old kid that just joined your fire department as a volunteer that will start showing symptoms really quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't take cumulative stress to get there. And we have to be cognizant of recognizing the symptoms of those around us and being able to talk about it in a normal way. It's a first step. Hopefully, my story of, hey, I left the field and then it hit me. It wasn't while I was actively working. Um, no doubt looking back, it was impacting my behavior and the things that I did and the adrenaline sports I pursued.
We had that mentality in the Marine Corps: work hard, play hard. So like the worse it was, the more we partied, and that it really is the worst thing you can do. But I think that's pretty common across with first responders too.
But then I leave that career, so I lose my identity, and then you get a lot of time to reflect back on some of the really cool things we did, right? Like working with the Knox County Sheriff's Department or working on these high risk activities that they were working on, right? Without going too deep, and some of the drills and practice that we got to do.
Thrills, and then you get out and you're still. I was told by the VA that I sometimes thrill seek. I don't think I do it as often as I used to, but
I definitely do, and that's my thing. People work like everybody asks, like, why would I do that? And you ask, why wouldn't I do that?
I drove by like some serious danger the other day, and I was like, I want to pull over so bad. But I was like, no, this isn't my place.
Yeah, but that's my wheelhouse, right? That's where I live, and that's what I thrived on. And now my identity is, hey, he's that guy that works down at the local Walmart and like says hi to you, and like he seems kind of cool, but like, and not that there's anything wrong with that. Like they pay me really well, and I love it. But at the end of the day, like, what's your fulfillment, right? Like, man, we really got those shelves stocked up good today. High five, go best friend. God, that kid screaming was really a high risk situation, but I found a lollipop and I gave it to them and they chilled out.
That's
like,
right.
Man, I talked that kid out of a freak out. That was awesome. So it's just different. And then for me, it was a long drive, 45 minutes in my car, twice daily, nothing but free thought and time. And guess what? It came pouring out.
Mine was on the mountain. And that's where I found isolation, and it was tough at first, but then having to reflect, and for me, I got into the Word, and I just obsessively read the Bible, and I went to a Christian Healing Center. It's outside Townsend. It's on top of the mountain out there, and it's called Eagle Rock, and they have healers that come from all over the world. I know I talk about it all the time, but if you don't, there's Christian healing centers everywhere. I think this one's extra special. Here in East Tennessee, and the healers gathered around me, and I finally put my PTSD at the cross. And but it wasn't just magically gone. I had to go through all those stages of grieving. I went through weeks of awakening, rereading old journals, remembering the things that had happened. And I went through a fear, horrible fear, the worst fear of my life. Nothing stands close to the level of fear I experienced. And then I went through rage for a month and a half, horrible rage. But then after that, it's been lifted. Now, do I still have bad days? Yeah, but not like I did. So dealing with PTSD, however that looks, whether it's going through a reboot program, a Christian healing center, but I don't think you can do it on your own. My path to recovery was through Christ. Other people find recovery through programs. So whatever that looks like to you or you have on your heart, I strongly encourage you to seek that out.
Yeah, and that's, and just thinking on the way this morning was, if I could just like put a beautiful bow and just say, what's the goal? Have the conversation. Just take that. Just have the conversation.
Yep.
Understand you're not alone. And the thoughts and the feelings you have are not unusual. Scientifically, medically.
They have books about it.
I assure you, people have written their entire thesis on tiny little parts of the first responder communities. And they just have the conversation, now you're not alone. Mm-hmm. And then seek help in any way that you can find it before it leads to a blow.
And don't give up.
And don't give up. Because I'm going to tell you, there are days that I get up and I'm like, man, I got this. I feel great. I feel confident. I know who I am. I'm a great father.
I don't need to go back to my counselor anymore. I've had bad counselors too. Yeah. I've had ones that I just didn't jive with. Just find a different one. There are so many. If you're not jiving with them, that's okay. Don't make it feel like it's a big breakup.
I just quit going, and I found a new one.
Yeah, find a new one.
The key was I found a new one. And we didn't jive. Like, I was there, it felt very cold. They were busy typing and talking and just interrogating. And I'm like,
They're just
bro,
there to write a report.
yeah, I'm
That's
like,
I
I mean,
didn't
I
jive
know
with
I've got
that.
like good insurance, but bro, and they're like, well, I can see you like 12 times. Like, I can see you 1,000 times. Like, I have resource, like it'll work out. But they were so focused on like
Yep.
the intake, the data, what box do I put you in?
I've been to one where all I hear is a typing, and they're halfway, their back's halfway turned to me, and they're reading, and I'm like, no, 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 no.
Yeah, I'm like, you're not even seeing like raw human emotion tells me more than your words. You can tell me anything you want to tell me, but I can see whether you're telling me the truth, right? Most of the time. But it's just like, gosh, the isolation I felt just thinking that how I felt was just so abnormal and I was so alone in the
And I was
world.
acting, I felt so fake too because I was faking that I was this and I'm successful at that. And I'm really, I'm so good at this and I have so many friends, but inside I was like totally alone, hated myself, hated life. I mean, like every day I was having like suicidal obsessions.
And it's like, so how do you get through that? Well, step one was admitting it to my friends and peers that I
Oh, you
trusted.
feel like you're not living a lie
It
anymore.
just pours out.
It's liberating.
But gosh, we got to get it to where our first responder community is so underserved when it comes to mental health and the realization that it's not a matter of if, it's when. It's going to.
Or how long has it already been?
Yeah. It happens it's your colleagues you sleep beside in the fire hall. It's your colleagues you're at the shooting range with. It's your paramedic students in school who've been
Everybody's
EMTs.
struggling.
Every single person in the first responder community is struggling. And it was struggles before COVID. COVID made it probably worse in manifest because we were even more isolated. But I'm telling you, this is nothing new.
And if you aren't in the first responder community and you don't have any friends, being kind to them when you see them out and about, just like when I'm out and about, if I have like a veteran shirt, someone will give me a discount or buy me a coffee. Do that for a first responder. It probably means quite a bit.
Just a hug, right? Oh, you want to hug me? Like, yeah, I do. Like, bring it in, brother. Like,
thank you.
Normalizing telling your partner you love them, right? It took me a long time to get there, but I still talk to my partner at least once a week. Multiple partners from my days in EMS, and I simply will just call and go, hey, it was really heavy on my heart to call you and tell you I love you. And they're like, first time it's kind of weird. Like, did you just call and tell me you love me? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And now in my current job, when I tell people I love them, they're like, what? But you just like.
That's crazy. I say love a lot, and I used to not before, but after I went through healing, because you just never known. You don't know how long it's been since someone said that. Like, hey man, I love you. Because there's all different types of love. And it doesn't have to be like, ooh, I love you. Like, hey Austin, I love you.
Like it's and it's like, if I can't even normalize telling you I love you, I sure can't normalize telling you that I'm broken.
Or that I love myself.
Or that I care about myself enough to tell you I'm not being the person I want to be because something is truly wrong.
Yeah.
And gosh, I'm weak and I need help. Oh wow, you're not weak. You're actually really
strong.
Yeah,
that's a serious strength.
Really strong that you finally admitted it and told somebody and you sought help.
And I promise you feel so much better once you come out about it. But do you have anything else to add about PTSD or a shout out to the support networks?
Yeah, I just talk. Like, you can't bottle this up.
Right.
It is going to come out.
Like what I do when I see, like, I'll approach someone at the gym that's got like a fire shirt on or anything. I'll be like, hey, and I'm Laura, and I used to battle PTSD. And like sometimes for just a split second, they look at me like I'm crazy, but then they want to start talking about it. So if you're like me and you're to a point where you like to talk about it, your voice is needed. Talk about it. Talk about it at the gym. Talk about it with your friends. If you're not there yet, then starting with a simple conversation with somebody.
Yep. And never discount what a simple I love you means or a phone call.
All right. Well, thank you. And share this with anyone that you think needs to hear it. Share it with somebody that is to a point where maybe they are ready to vocalize it. Share it with somebody who you think might possibly be silently being suffocated by PTSD, or a support network. If you know a spouse whose husband or wife is battling with PTSD, shout out to the support networks. You guys don't get enough credit either. So,
awesome.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
That's a wrap.
Sandwiches.
Mom.
Mom.